Yes, you are lost for believing theories. You are lost for being in religions that follow theories based on these verses I'm going to show. The verse that you will get an invincible body with a nervous system, and people will be tortured with this, and that it will happen in a twinkling of an eye. It causes you to hate anyone that is not in your religion. And I have found you out for this because they also take away sonship, and they make sonship mean only Jesus. So that if you have Jesus, you have God and the Father. But that is not true. I'm going to show from the scriptures that it is talking about, you learn this from the beginning. And it talks about Cain, and it talks about we're children of God in these passages that I'm going to read. And from the beginning means that you have heard about sonship and to love one another from the beginning of time, not from the beginning of the day of Pentecost, because that was not. I also want you to note that being grafted in is to include the whole world, and not just your religion, and not just the theories that you believe, but it is to graft in and reconcile the world, the verse says. So let's look at these verses. 1 John verse 8, it talks about the new commandment. Because of the darkness has passed, and the true light now shineth. He that saith he is in the light, but hateth his brother, is in the darkness even till now. Okay? So this means anyone, because there is another passage that clearly states that if you hate a man, and that you can hate a saved man as well as an unsaved man. I'm going to go into this saved, and save in the Bible is always knowledge, because of the lost sheep of Israel were lost. They perished for lack of knowledge. My sheep have gone astray. They perished for lack of knowledge. And Jesus came to save his people from their sins. And so I've done a YouTube on that, saved. You can look up saved and find me. And I cover that because every passage lets you know it's saving a knowledge. And there are people who had a saving of a body, but they didn't have to. They weren't looking to save an eternal soul or whatever. They were looking to save their body. And so then, as you read through this verse, he says, "Little children." And so we're called little children when it's talking about loving your brother. Now, that does not mean only of certain body of religious faith are children. He goes into more detail with that here, and he talks about Antichrist, and this is how theology says, oh, well, sonship must mean Christ, because it talks about he that denieth the Son, that hath not the Father, he that abideth not in the Son, hath not the Father. So, you have to acknowledge the Son to have the Father, it says in verse 23. So acknowledging the Son. And the very next verse says, from the beginning you have learned this twice. It says it in there. It says you have heard it from the beginning, and which you have heard from the beginning still remain in you, that you should continue in the Son and the Father. You've heard that from the beginning of time, to continue in the Son and the Father. Not since Jesus. Okay? Or else it would even say Jesus here. The Bible uses Jesus' name, and he could insert Jesus if it's talking about Jesus. So it could say, he that hath not Jesus hath not the Father. And since it doesn't say that, it is talking about sonship, which includes everyone. Now, I'm not the first to commentary that, but I am the first to commentary that this means sonship and not Jesus, because it mentions twice from the beginning, and then it calls us children of God in verse 10 of chapter 3, and from the beginning again in 11, and then it mentions Cain, who was clearly from the beginning. So, John 2, John brings this up again, the new commandment. And it's mentioned in verse 5, and in 6 it says, you shall walk in this new commandment of love one another. And then he says, they come in the flesh in verse 7 and receive a reward in verse 8. And then 9 says, whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not the Father. And it says that they have not the Father and the Son. It brings up sonship again when it could use Jesus' name there. It could say hath not the Father or Jesus, but it brings up sonship again in this passage mentioning Jesus. And so you have Jesus and you have sonship. And so the transgressing word is the original language to go against, contrary to law. And they have added, new translations have added progressive there, which means that they can just take any old commandment up off the blue that they want to try to put in here and say it was Jesus' commandment. Any kind of lifestyle that Jesus did or any kind of thing, and they can say that was Jesus. Now, Romans 11:15 is where I'm talking about being grafted in. God hewn off the original branches, not to hew in the Israelites and your religion, but to, it says, he cast them off so that he may reconcile the world. And what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? So he's going to give the world life from the dead, not just your faith, not just your religion. And he says the world. He's going to give them life from the dead. And it talks about the branch thing. And it says because of unbelief, they were cast off. Well, in 32, he says God concluded them all to unbelief that he may have mercy on all. So consider that. Then Corinthians is where you have the only mention of our spirit. This is our spirit chapter about our spirit, and it goes into detail. It even says the natural body, the spiritual body, and it talks about heavenly things, and so that would be righteousness. And it says we shall all not sleep, but we shall all be changed. And so if we can all have righteous things, I've written a book of righteous archetypes, and I have all the biblical archetypes. I'm the only one in the world that's gotten all of them out of the concordance and all of them that I could possibly find. And there are 2,000 of these. And if everyone had these righteous words, we could, in a twinkling of an eye, we could all start being righteous and working righteousness. And man can do that. But God can't give an invincible body to be tortured with for eternity without any harm, and do it in a twinkling of an eye, billions of bodies, because it takes him time to make things. He uses the angels' help, and there is a time frame that he does everything, and he uses things to make things, dust and whatever. He doesn't just poof into existence a bunch of invincible bodies. So you are being duped into believing this through theology, through theories. So these theories that have no proof whatsoever that you believe, you need to give them up, and you will give up religion, because the religion you in, they are only believing this. You have to believe this to go there to be saved, because you have to be saved from this invincible body. And that's not in the Bible, saving from an invincible body. And you have to believe in Jesus and let everyone know, hey, I believe Jesus, hey, I believe Jesus, so that they will say, okay, you have God because you believe in Jesus. And you can't just say, hey, I'm a child of God. I can do righteous things, and I have sonship, and I have the Father because I believe, and I try to do as many awesome things and works as I can because I'm a child of God. You can't do that in any religion, because they're going to insist that you're trying to get by on works. So they even condemn works of righteousness and doing things that are amazing and righteous things and works. They condemn any work in a religious faith most religious faiths. There are religious faiths that just put up a sign and say, just worship with us, and we're not going to really teach you anything. We're just going to praise Jesus or something. Um, so I know those people personally. But anyway, check it out, and if you have any comments, leave them, and I respond to any comments.